Hello! Thank you so much for clicking on this video. My name is Jenna Garrett and I am a student at The Ohio State University, majoring in forestry, fisheries, and wildlife. This page that you're on right now is the Go Native page on the Ohio Division of Natural Resources website, where we discuss native planting and native gardening in the state of Ohio. So I'm assuming by being here that you're interested. So the definition of native planting is actually pretty simple. It's right there in the name. It's the intentional planting of native flora in our gardens and landscaping versus more traditional methods that involve a lot of non-native and even invasive species. As this is the ODNR page, we are specifically talking about native planting in relationship to Ohio. So we'll be talking about Ohio native plants and how to incorporate them into your gardens. Many people have noticed that today's culture seems less in tune with the nature around them, and I think it's a problem of proximity, because you seem to have to travel to like nature centers or travel anywhere really to go to nature, when ideally, if you have a yard, you could have nature just right outside your front door with native planting. Native planting is how we bring the beautiful nature of Ohio into our yards and closer to us. Now, native planting is important because it is better for your yard and your wallet. Native planting lasts longer than traditional landscaping. Native planting supports local wildlife, and any step towards native planting is a step in the right direction. Many people have commented about how today's culture seems out of touch with the nature surrounding them, and I personally think it's an issue of proximity. You seem to have to travel in a car to like 20 or 30 minutes away from your house to find nature centers, when ideally, if you have a yard, you could have nature right outside your front door through native planting. Native planting is how we bring the beautiful nature of Ohio into our backyards and closer to us. Now, native planting is better for your yard and your wallet. Native planting lasts longer than traditional landscaping. Native planting supports local wildlife, and any step toward native planting is a step in the right direction. Now, I realize as a landowner that redoing your entire landscaping situation so that you can have more native plants sounds very cost intensive, and that's why it's the first thing we cover, because native planting is better for your yard and your wallet. Maintaining native plants takes little to no fertilizer and usually no pesticides. Now, traditional landscaping uses a lot of non-native and invasive species who have no defense against Ohio native pests and insects. So the use of pesticides and insecticides is widespread, and usually it's a high volume in order to maintain these plants. So this is a lot of money, time, and also there have been studies that show that insecticides and pesticide use in concentrated area can lead to a decline in public health in that specific area. So if you have children, or you live in a close-knit community or in a cul-de-sac, you could also be affecting your neighbor's health. So by using native plants, you cut out the need, the money, the need, and the risk that comes with insecticides and pesticides. Also, on the fertilizer side, you might need to use like leaves or a sort of natural mulch to start off the native planting. But if you plan the species that you plant in a solid way and look for carbon fixers and nitrate fixer plants, you will be able to have a cycle, essentially, like there is in nature, where you don't need to lay down fertilizer every year because you have these three plants that are carbon fixers that are feeding the rest of the garden or the area that you have planted, and the nitrate fixers feed the rest, and it just becomes a cycle. So it's a low maintenance, low cost, and good, healthy situation for you and your garden. Non-native and invasive plants also take a lot of water. Native plants, again, being fit for this area and this climate, usually take less water to maintain than non-native and invasive species. This is a twofold situation. So native plants have deeper roots than non-native and invasive plants. They're able to break through the layers of soil. Obviously, this is dependent on what type of land you have. So if you have what's considered a prairie versus what's considered a wetland, those plants that work that way will change. Plants native to Ohio are able to get their root systems deeper into the soil layer and break through layers of clay and organic matter, so they also have access to those nutrients. With those deeper root systems, they also help stop erosion in your garden, which is a big deal. Those root systems, as shown in this image, are a lot deeper, so you can hold together all those really healthy layers of soil that are needed to maintain native gardens. Also, with those deeper root systems, native plants to Ohio are able to filter stormwater better, so it leads to being able to water these plants less. Those deep root systems give them access to wells of water and water reserves that are deeper in the soil, as well as they're able to filter the storm water that comes, from rain and storms better. So that leads to less watering on your behalf, which is, again, another low maintenance, costs less, and they're beautiful. Native plants last longer than traditional landscaping. Thanks again to those very deep root systems, it's harder for these plants to get knocked over or, crushed in some way. They still have those very deep root systems, so they're still present in the ecosystem. So they last longer, and usually they are perennials, so they come back every year due to those root systems. Like I've said before, native plants are much more low maintenance. They are used to this area, they're used to the weather patterns. Obviously, there's going to be some maintenance of watering, perhaps fertilizing if you see fit, but it's going to be much less time consuming and much less money consuming. There was actually a study done by Rutgers, New Jersey Ag Experimental Station Cooperative Extension. Yes, very long name, on deer grazing and native plants, and it's shown that native landscaping has led to lower deer grazing of your landscaping. There's a link below to the study. It has a graph that shows the score of each plant in terms of the ability to resist deer grazing. So if you live in a wooded area where deer are most likely going to come in contact with your landscaping, planting those specific plants is probably the best idea in order to keep a lawn to your liking, or a garden, or lawn or garden to your liking, that still helps support the local ecosystem. Speaking of supporting local ecosystems, native planting supports local wildlife. These areas of native planting will provide shelter and food for local insects or animals or birds. Also, it attracts those songbirds to your area, especially if you plant flowers that have seeds. So if you love birds and you love birdsong, you are creating a little area where birds could land, and they're probably going to be more attracted to your yard if you use native plants that they're familiar with. You can also design your native planting area to cater to specific subsets of species, such as pollinators, like hummingbirds and bees. So you can arrange the flowers or the native plants in such a way as to attract them, and plant specific types of pollen-producing plants in order to attract pollinators. If you do that, I would also suggest that you build a bee house. You can get honey and also support native pollinators. It's just a good idea. You can also build your area to attract migratory butterfly populations by planting butterfly weed and milkweed. These are both local and native plants to Ohio that attract migratory butterflies. It gives them food and also a place to lay their eggs, where you can get caterpillars and eventually more butterflies. Their migration, migratory butterflies migrate almost 1,000 miles every year, and Ohio is a midway place for a lot of them, so having a place for them to land and eat and refuel before they keep going is great. And also, if you have kids, or even if you just enjoy butterflies, you will have them around. Now I realize that all this talk about restructuring your entire landscape or your entire yard to accommodate birds and bees and butterflies, or just to put a better impact out into the environment, sounds very stressful, but any step towards native planting is a step in the right direction. Specific Ohio native flowers that I would recommend include white trillium, wild geraniums, goldenrod, trout lily, milkweed, butterfly weed, and black-eyed Susans. These are all Ohio native wildflowers that help support butterflies, birds, and pollinators. Now, when actually getting into the meat of native planting, there are two approaches to consider: the conventional appearance approach and the restoration approach. Now, the conventional appearance approach attempts to follow traditional landscaping rules, such as flower beds, monocultures, less diverse ground cover, but just substitutes the industrial ornamental plants with native plants. And then restoration, which is more free-form and there's no separation or beds, so it would take up like a whole area or maybe even your whole yard. And it's trying to recreate how that land may have looked before humans interacted with it. So you're trying to go from as much of a wild and native Ohio landscape as possible. Now, obviously, this is a video where I talk about native planting, and I obviously fully support it, but I also have to acknowledge that there are some downsides to native planting, specifically in the gardening section. So this argument is called the twins versus siblings argument. So industrial plants are asexually propagated, meaning that they're all genetically the same. So you're going to get flowers that have almost identical coloring, almost identical heights. It gives this like very good uniform look, which is great for a lot of people who want to have ornamental beds of flowers. Now, the problem with native and wild flowers is that these plants are unpredictable since they are propagating themselves. So you are likely to have more variation in coloration or heights, even if you separate beds of flowers. So let's just say I have an entire bed of just goldenrod. I might have wildly varying heights and also wildly varying coloration because of pollinators. Now, if you decide that this downside isn't going to shy you away from native planting, thank you so much. Congratulations, you have started the first step on your way to native planting. Now, the website nativeplanting.org has a very detailed instructional section on how to start a native planting area. I am just going to give a quick overview. So first you have to decide which approach works best for you. The conventional approach of the flower bed still, but subbing native plants, or if the restorative approach fits what you want more. So you have to decide right at the beginning which of those is going to fit what you want and need out of a garden. And then you need to make a game plan, probably plotting out an area if you're doing the conventional, maintaining and building flower beds or cleaning out the old flower beds. If you're doing restorative, there is a lot of work to be done on making a plan to make sure that like your plants have as good a chance as anything to grow and propagate correctly. And then you're going to need to prep the area, which probably, if it's grass, involves a lot of roto rooting and tilling. And obviously, if it's flower beds, just ripping up and trying to supplement native soil versus putting in like potting soil or flower bed soil. Because if you're planting native flowers and you want them to last year after year, giving them native soil is going to be very helpful. And then prepping the area is probably going to take a long time. And obviously, plantnative.org has much more descriptive instructions on how to do so. And then finally, you get to plant. I would love to see as many photos of native planted areas as possible. I think they're beautiful and they really add something to your house or your area that you own. Okay, well that about ends my time with y'all today. Thank you so much for watching my video on native planting. Native planting is how we bring the beautiful nature of Ohio into our yards and closer to us. Native planting is important because it's better for your yard and your wallet. Native plants last longer than traditional landscaping. Native planting supports local wildlife, and any step towards native planting is a step in the right direction. So as we are still on the ODNR website, if you scroll down, you will see a native species list that is broken up by habitat type that will help you pick which plants are best for your yard or the area that you are native planting. There's also more descriptive info located at the Native Plant Society of North Ohio website, the Ohio Landscape Association website, and at plantnative.org. I'd like to thank you all so much for listening to me speak, and I hope you guys go out with a new interest in native planting and you look out for those native wildflowers that really capture the spirit of what it means to be a Buckeye.